I knew exactly what to say to destroy my boyfriend, and I said it anyway. The apartment was clean. Too clean. It smelled of a harsh, lemon-scented cleaner, a smell I despise, a smell Kellen knew I despised. I dropped my keys on the small entryway table. The clatter echoing unnaturally in the space we used to fill with music or the low hum of the TV. His worn-out running shoes weren't by the door. The faded blue sweater he always left draped over the back of the armchair was gone. I walked into the living room, a slow, creeping dread beginning to crawl up my spine. The bookshelf had a gaping hole where his physical therapy textbooks and worn sci-fi paperbacks used to be. Not a speck of dust remained. This wasn't the work of a man who'd stormed out in a fit of rage, leaving a trail of angry destruction. This was a planned extraction, executed with the kind of quiet, methodical precision I usually reserved for my data spreadsheets. In the bathroom, his toothbrush, his razor, his entire presence on that shared countertop had been wiped clean. I stood in the middle of our living room, the sterile quiet pressing in on me. The panic, when it finally broke through the initial shock, wasn't hot and frantic. It was a cold, heavy certainty that settled in my gut. He hadn't just left. He had surgically removed himself from my life. I'm a data analyst. My world is built on logic, on patterns, on the beautiful, irrefutable clarity of numbers. I win arguments because I have the data to back them up. I solve problems by breaking them down into quantifiable parts. Kellen was a physical therapist. His world was about healing, about patience, about understanding the delicate, unquantifiable mechanics of the human body and spirit. He believed in things you couldn't chart, feelings you couldn't graph. Our differences were, for a long time, what made us work. He softened my edges, I gave him structure. But my core flaw, the one I saw but never truly acknowledged, was my cognitive arrogance. I didn't just believe I was right. I believed my way of being right was superior. This manifested in 1,000 small cuts. At dinner parties, if he was telling a story, I'd jump in to correct a minor detail, the date, the name of the street, not to be helpful, but to publicly assert my better memory. When he complained about the neck pain I got from work, he'd gently show me stretches, explaining the musculature with an expert's gentle confidence. I'd listen, then spend an hour online and present him with 3 studies I'd found, declaring my meta-analysis suggested a different ergonomic approach was more efficient. I watched the professional pride in his eyes curdle into a familiar look of weary resignation. I was invalidating his entire career, and I was doing it with a smile, convinced I was just being thorough. I always mistook his exhaustion for agreement. When we planned our finances, I wouldn't just discuss it. I'd create a multi-tabbed spreadsheet with conditional formatting and pivot tables, presenting it to him not as a proposal, but as a concluded proof that my plan was the only logical option. He would just sigh that soft, weary sound and say, "Okay, Ember, whatever you think is best." He tried to share his world with me. He'd come home glowing about an elderly patient who had, after months of work, regained enough mobility to hold their grandchild for the first time. It was a sacred, beautiful victory for him. My response? I asked for the patient's initial and current range of motion metrics, wanting to calculate the percentage of improvement. The light in his eyes would just die. "It's not about the numbers, Ember," he'd say quietly, and the wall between us would get a little bit thicker. The invisible red line, the one I saw, stepped over, and then pretended wasn't there, was his past. It came out one night after we watched a film with a particularly cruel, domineering father character. Kellen was silent for a long time afterwards. He told me his own father used words as weapons. A failed academic who belittled his wife and children with cold, precise remarks. "It's not the yelling I remember," he'd said, staring at the ceiling. "It's the quiet way he could say something that would just gut you. He'd take something you were proud of and twist it into a weakness. Oh, you're a sensitive kid? That just means you're weak. You're thoughtful? That just means you're slow." He knew exactly where your biggest insecurity was, and he'd slide the knife in so precisely you wouldn't even bleed, you'd just be dead inside. He looked at me then, his eyes dark with a pain I couldn't analyze. "Promise me," he whispered, "promise me you'll never do that. We can fight, we can scream, but we never, ever use words to try and kill a part of each other." I held him and I promised. But in the cold, logical part of my brain, a place where emotions were just messy variables, I filed that information away. It wasn't just a sacred trust. To the analyst in me, the part that always needed to win, it was a data point mapping his greatest vulnerability. His kill switch. I acknowledged it, stored it, and with the same detached sincerity I used to click, "I agree," on software terms and conditions, I promised myself I'd never use it, never truly internalizing the devastating cost of the breach. The argument started, as these things always do, over something small. We had a hiking trip planned for the weekend, a rare 2 days carved out to escape the city and just be us. On Thursday afternoon, I got an email. A high-priority project at work had been pushed up. My team lead was asking for volunteers to come in on Saturday to get ahead of it. It was an opportunity, a chance to shine. When I told Kellen, I framed it as a logical necessity. "It's a huge visibility project," I explained, already pulling up my calendar on my phone. "We can just push the hike to next month. No big deal." He didn't look up from the vegetables he was chopping. "It is a big deal to me, Ember. We've had this planned for 2 months." I booked the cabin. I took the Friday afternoon shift off so we could leave early. "And I can get the deposit back," I countered, already problem-solving. "And you can swap your shift back. Logically, it's an easy fix." "This isn't a logic problem," he said, and his voice was dangerously quiet. "This is a pattern. My time, our time, is always the variable you're willing to sacrifice. Your work is a constant." He was right. And because he was right, and because I had no data to refute the emotional truth of his statement, I felt the familiar, hot prickle of indignation. I was losing the argument. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't being irrational, he was simply stating a fact, and it was a fact that made me the villain. My cognitive arrogance couldn't stand it. A switch flipped in my head. The frustration melted away and was replaced by a cold, clean clarity. I saw the path to victory, and it was paved with his pain. I knew what I was about to do. I could see the words lining up in my mind like soldiers, each one sharpened to a perfect, cruel point. A sane person would have stopped. A loving person would have recoiled in horror. But the part of me that needed to win, the part that saw every disagreement as a battle for intellectual dominance, was ecstatic. I was going to burn it all down to prove I was right. "You wouldn't understand what real professional pressure is," I started, my voice dripping with condescension. "Your biggest challenge at work is deciding whether to use lavender or eucalyptus oil." He flinched, the knife stilling in his hand. "That's not fair, Ember." "Isn't it? It must be so nice to have a job that's essentially a well-paid hobby. You get to play the hero, fixing people's sore backs. Meanwhile, I'm in a real, competitive field where one missed opportunity can set you back for years. But please, tell me more about how I should sacrifice my career for a walk in the woods." His face went pale. "Why are you doing this?" And then I deployed the weapon. I didn't raise my voice. I did the opposite. I lowered it, making it calm, analytical, and utterly devoid of emotion, just as he'd described his father's. "I'm doing this because I'm finally seeing you clearly," I said, the words tasting like acid and power on my tongue. "This is why you can't handle a simple change of plans. It's not about the hike, it's because you're so rigid, so fragile. You wrap yourself up in these little principles and feelings because you're terrified of the real world." I took a step closer. "You think it makes you noble, but it's just weakness. It's the same pathetic, stubborn pride that made your father a bitter man who peaked in graduate school and spent the rest of his life blaming everyone else for his failures." He just stared at me, his eyes wide with a horror so profound it was almost silent. I wasn't done. I went for the kill. "You're so terrified of becoming him," I whispered, leaning in, "that you've become his perfect mirror image, a man who lets his own inflexible little rules ruin everything good in his life." He didn't shatter. He didn't scream or throw the knife or call me a bitch. He did something much worse. He went still. The last vestiges of color drained from his face, leaving it a waxy, translucent white. The anger, the frustration, the hurt, it all vanished from his expression, replaced by a terrifying, absolute emptiness. It was the look of a circuit being overloaded, of a system shutting down to prevent catastrophic failure. He had been there in the room, fighting with me. And then he was gone. He carefully placed the knife on the cutting board, his movements slow and deliberate, as if he were handling a piece of unexploded ordnance. He looked at me, but it wasn't really at me. It was through me. His eyes were like polished stones, reflecting nothing. The man I loved, The man whose entire being was an open book of warmth and emotion had become a perfect stranger in the space of a single heartbeat. Without a word, he turned and walked into our bedroom, closing the door softly behind him. The click of the latch was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I stood in the kitchen, my heart hammering with the adrenaline of the fight, the ugly triumph still ringing in my ears. I waited. I expected the door to fly open, for the real fight to begin. The yelling, the crying, the storming out. Nothing, just a profound, suffocating silence from the other side of that door. I spent the night on the couch, telling myself he was being dramatic, that he was trying to punish me with silence. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee. For a wild, stupid moment, hope surged through me. It was routine. He was over it. I walked into the kitchen, a conciliatory smile already forming on my lips. Kellen was sitting at the small dining table, a mug of coffee untouched in front of him. He was fully dressed, and his duffel bag was on the floor beside his chair. He looked up at me, and the emptiness was still there. It was a settled, permanent thing. "Ember," he said, and his voice was flat, devoid of any inflection. It was the voice of a man reading a weather report. "What you said last night. You used the exact words, the exact tone that my father used. You took the deepest trauma of my life, the one thing I ever asked you to protect, and you used it as a weapon to win an argument about a hiking trip." He paused, taking a slow breath. "I'm not angry, I'm just done. The part of me that could love you, that could trust you not to do that, is gone. You killed it. I spent years learning that I wasn't the weak, pathetic person he said I was. I will not spend another single day of my life with someone who holds the blueprint to my destruction and is willing to use it." He stood up. "I can't do this. I can't live waiting for the next time you decide that winning is more important than my soul. We're over." And with that, he picked up his bag, walked to the door, and left, closing it just as softly as he had the night before. For the first 24 hours, I operated on pure, undiluted arrogance. He was being theatrical. He was punishing me, trying to teach me a lesson. Fine. Let him have his little tantrum. He'd be back by Sunday evening, sheepish and ready to talk. I ordered takeout, binged a show, and pointedly did not check my phone. By the second day, a sliver of unease crept in. I sent him a text. "Are you done with this ridiculous silent treatment yet?" No reply. I tried calling. It went straight to voicemail. That's when the cold dread from the first night began to return, this time with a frantic, buzzing energy. He had never, not once in our 4 years together, ignored a direct call. I started cycling through our messaging apps. WhatsApp, single gray check. Instagram, his profile picture was gone, replaced by a generic gray avatar. When I searched his name, it came up with user not found. He had blocked me, everywhere. Panic, real and clawing, finally set in. My logical brain, my greatest asset, was useless. There was no data to analyze, no pattern to discern, just a wall of absolute silence. I did the only thing I could think of. I called Olivia. She was our closest mutual friend, the one who'd introduced us. "Hey, Liv," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Silly question, but have you heard from Kellen? He's gone off the grid, and I'm a little worried." There was a pause on the other end of the line. It was just a second too long. "Oh, hey, Ember," she said, her voice strained with an unfamiliar formality. "Yeah, he's staying on my couch for a bit." Relief washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. "Oh, thank God. Can you just tell him to call me? This whole thing is insane." Another pause, this one was heavier. "Ember, I don't think that's a good idea. He's really not okay." "What did he tell you?" I demanded, the indignation flaring up again. "Did he tell you about the fight? He's blowing this way out of proportion." "He told me what you said," Olivia said, and all the warmth was gone from her voice, replaced by a chilly disappointment. "Look, I love you, but you know what his father was like. You know that's the one line you can't cross. I really don't want to be in the middle of this." The awkward distancing was a physical blow. She wasn't taking his side. She was recoiling from mine. A few days later, drowning in a sea of takeout containers and self-pity, I decided to do a deep clean, an attempt to impose some order on my collapsing world. I started on his desk, the one he rarely used. In the bottom drawer, tucked beneath old user manuals and warranty cards, was a thick manila folder. My name was written on the tab in his neat, careful print. I opened it. It was filled with paperwork for a spousal visa application. Kellen was from Canada. The visa process was a nightmare we'd been putting off for years. He had done it all. Filled out every form, gathered every required document, even written a draft of his personal statement, a beautiful, heartfelt letter about building a future with me in this country. Tucked inside the folder was a small, velvet blue box, and inside that, a simple, elegant engagement ring. Pinned to the inside of the folder was a receipt from a jewelry store. The date on it was from the Tuesday before our fight. He had been planning to propose on that hiking trip, the one I had been so willing to discard for a Saturday at the office. The spreadsheet in my brain, the one that calculated costs and benefits, finally processed the true, catastrophic loss. I hadn't just lost an argument or a boyfriend. I had, with surgical precision, amputated my own future. Months have passed. The apartment is still too quiet, but the smell of lemon cleaner has faded, replaced by the stale scent of my own apathy. I haven't tried to contact him again. Olivia's polite but firm refusal to be my go-between was the final, definitive message. The lines of communication weren't just down. They had been dismantled, the poles ripped out, the wires melted down. My life now exists in a sickening, obsessive loop. I work, I eat, I sleep. And in every spare moment in between, I watch him. I created a fake Instagram account, a ghost with no name and no followers. It's my portal into the life I destroyed. Kellen's profile is public. He's not a big poster, never was. But what he does share is a quiet chronicle of a life being carefully, patiently rebuilt. There are pictures of him hiking on the very trail we were supposed to take, but he's with Olivia and her husband now. There's a short, blurry video of a scruffy orange cat he adopted from a local shelter, batting at his hand. He named it Rusty. We had always talked about getting a cat together. Every post is a fresh stab. It's not what's in the pictures that kills me, it's the absence. The gaping, ember-shaped hole. He's not flaunting a new life, he's just living. And his life, it turns out, functions perfectly well, perhaps even better, without me in it. The arrogance that fueled me for so long has curdled into a constant, low-grade nausea. I was so sure of my own indispensable value, my superior intellect. I was the analyst, the strategist. But I was just a toxic variable he successfully eliminated to optimize his own well-being. The final scene of my pathetic little tragedy plays out late at night in the blue glow of my phone screen. He posted a new picture, a group shot from what looks like a birthday dinner for one of his colleagues. It's a noisy, happy picture. People are laughing, raising their glasses, and Kellen is in the middle of it all. He's smiling, a genuine, unburdened smile I haven't seen in years. A woman next to him, someone I've never seen before, has her head tilted towards his, sharing a laugh. He looks relaxed, he looks happy, he looks free. I lock my phone and the screen goes black, reflecting my own face back at me. Pale, hollow-eyed, a ghost haunting the ruins of a home I burned down myself. There is no one left to argue with, no one to prove right or wrong. There is only the data, cold and irrefutable. And the data shows, with absolute certainty, that I lost everything to win nothing.